In the beginning there was no earth, no sky, no sea, only a vast and patient emptiness that the old voices named Ginnungagap, the yawning void where nothing breathed and nothing slept. It stretched without edge or end, a silence so complete that it seemed to hold its breath across the unmeasured ages, waiting for something it could not yet imagine. To the north of this great nothing, a world of ice took shape, and they called it Niflheim, the home of mist and bitter cold. From a roaring spring named Ymir poured 11 rivers, and as they flowed far from their source, the waters froze layer upon layer, until great glaciers ground together in the dark, and the rime crept outward like a slow and glittering tide. To the south burned its opposite, Muspelheim, a kingdom of fire and ruin where rivers of flame rolled and sparks leapt into the blackness. There, at the border of the burning land, sat a watchful giant named Surtur, his sword blazing brighter than the sun, guarding the fire that would one day consume all things. For long ages these two realms remained apart, the frozen and the flaming, each unaware of the other. But the void between them was narrower than it seemed, and at last the warm breath of Muspelheim drifted north to brush against the ancient ice. Where heat met frost, the glaciers softened and began to weep, and from those melting drops something stirred to life. The cold gave it shape, the fire gave it warmth, and so was born the first living thing, a being neither god nor man but something older and stranger than both. His name was Ymir, the frost giant, the ancestor of all who would come after, vast beyond the reckoning of any mortal mind. As he slept upon the thawing ice, sweat gathered beneath his great arms, and from that sweat grew a man and a woman, while one of his legs fathered a son upon the other. So the race of giants, the Jotnar, came into being, born of Ymir's slumbering body, wild and hungry, and full of an ancient strength that the world would never quite forget. But Ymir could not live on ice alone, and so from the same melting rime came another creature to sustain him, a great hornless cow named Audhumla. 4 rivers of milk flowed from her, and on these the giant drank his fill. Yet the cow too needed nourishment, and finding only ice around her, she began to lick the salty, frost-covered stones. She licked through the first day and uncovered a sweep of hair frozen within the ice. She licked through the second day and a head emerged. And on the third day she freed an entire being from the frozen stone, beautiful and radiant, and unlike the brooding giants in every way. His name was Buri, and he was the first of the gods. Buri had a son named Bor, and Bor looked upon the daughters of the giants and took one for his wife, a giantess named Bisla. From their union came 3 sons, and these 3 would change the shape of all existence. The eldest was Odin, who would become the wandering father of wisdom and war. The second was Vili, and the third was Vi, and together the 3 brothers carried in their blood both the fire of the gods and the deep cold strength of the giants from whom their mother came. As the brothers grew, they looked upon Ymir and the endless brood of giants spilling from his body, and they saw a world that could never be while the great frost giant lived, for his children multiplied without end, and their hunger had no bottom. And so Odin, Vili, and Vi made a terrible decision, the first great act of will in a universe that had until then only drifted. They turned upon their ancient ancestor, and they slew him. Ymir's death was a flood. So much blood poured from the giant that it rose like an ocean and drowned nearly all of his descendants. The whole teeming race of frost giants swept away in the deluge save for one, a giant named Ymir, who escaped with his wife in a hollowed vessel and floated to safety. From that single surviving pair, the giants would rise again in later ages, and they would never forgive the gods for the murder of their forefather, nor for the world the brothers were about to build from his corpse. For the sons of Bor did not let Ymir's vast body go to waste. They dragged him into the center of the yawning void, and from his flesh they fashioned the earth. His blood became the seas and the lakes that ringed it. His bones they raised into mountains, and his teeth and the shattered fragments of his bones they scattered as boulders and stones. From his hollow skull they lifted the great dome of the sky and set it arching over the world, and at its 4 corners they placed 4 dwarves to hold it aloft, naming them North, South, East, and West. Then they took the sparks and glowing embers that drifted up from burning Muspelheim and flung them into the new sky, and these became the stars and the wandering lights of heaven. They set the sun and the moon upon their courses, 2 gentle riders forever fleeing across the sky, pursued by wolves who would chase them until the ending of the world. The brains of Ymir they cast upward to drift as brooding clouds, and his eyebrows they bent into a great protective wall to enclose the place where the new beings of the earth would one day dwell. They named that sheltered middle realm Midgard, the guarded enclosure that would become the home of humankind. In the rotting flesh of the dead giant, maggots had bred and squirmed, and the gods looked upon these small, crawling things and gave them reason and shape. Some they made into the dark elves and the dwarves, cunning craftsmen who would live beneath the stones and within the deep places of the earth, forging treasures and weapons of unmatched beauty in the glow of their hidden fires. So even from corruption the brothers drew wonder, and the world filled slowly with life in all its forms. Yet the earth still felt empty, for there were no people to walk upon Midgard's green meadows or sail its bright new seas. One day, as Odin and his brothers wandered along the shore of the young world, they came upon two trees lying fallen and lifeless upon the sand, an ash and an elm, washed up by the tide and shaped almost like sleeping figures. The brothers paused, and in those silent forms they saw a possibility. Odin bent down and breathed into them the gift of life and spirit, the warm breath that stirs in every living chest. Vili gave them mind and movement, the will to think and the strength to act. And V granted them their senses, the power to see the colors of the world, to hear its songs, to speak and to feel the touch of wind and rain upon their skin. From the ash tree they made the first man and named him Ask, and from the elm they made the first woman and named her Ymir. The gods clothed them and gave them Midgard for their home, and from these two would descend all the families of humankind, every soul who would ever live beneath the sheltering sky of the world the brothers had built. Now the gods turned to their own dwelling, and high above Midgard they raised a shining realm and called it Asgard, the home of the Aesir, the family of gods who would rule from those golden heights. Between the world of men below and the world of gods above they hung a trembling bridge of fire and light, the rainbow Bifrost, its three burning colors arching across the heavens so that the gods might pass between the realms. And at the far end of that bridge stood a watchman, Heimdall, whose eyes could see to the ends of the earth, and whose ears could hear the grass grow in the meadows and the wool grow on the backs of sheep, ever waiting, ever listening for the day the giants would come. Binding all these worlds together stood the greatest of all living things, the world tree Yggdrasil, an ash so vast that its branches spread above the heavens and its three great roots reached down into the deep places of creation. One root stretched into the realm of the gods, one into the land of the frost giants, and one into the misty dark of Niflheim. Beneath its branches lay the well of wisdom, guarded by the wise being Mimir, whose waters held the memory of all things. At the tree's foot sat the three Norns, ancient women who carved the fates of gods and men alike into the wood, and tended the roots with water from the sacred well so that the great tree would not wither. Among Yggdrasil's branches lived a whole world of creatures. An eagle perched at its crown with a hawk between its eyes, a squirrel named Ratatoskr who ran ceaselessly up and down the trunk carrying insults between the eagle above and the great serpent Nidhogg who gnawed forever at the roots below. 4 stags wandered through its leaves, and the tree suffered constantly, bitten and torn and yet always living, for it was the spine of all existence, the axis around which the 9 worlds turned. And so the order of things was set. There was Asgard, the bright home of the Aesir, ruled by Odin, who sat upon his high throne and looked out across all the worlds. There was Vanaheim, home of an older family of gods, the Vanir, masters of fertility and the sea and the deep magic of the earth. There was Midgard, the realm of men, ringed by the great ocean in whose depths coiled a monstrous serpent. There was Jotunheim, the wild land of the giants beyond the eastern mountains, forever the enemies of the gods. There were the realms of the elves, light and dark, the kingdom of the dwarves, the misty cold of Niflheim, and the burning waste of Muspelheim, where Surtur still watched with his flaming sword. 9 worlds in all, cradled in the branches and roots of the world tree. Odin the Wanderer, the one-eyed seeker who had given his very eye to drink from Mimir's well of wisdom, knew even in those first bright days that the story which began in ice and fire would also end in them. He had glimpsed the shape of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when the wolves would at last catch the sun and moon, when the great serpent would rise from the sea, when Surtur's fire would sweep across the world, and the rainbow bridge would shatter beneath the feet of the marching giants. He knew that all he had built from the body of Ymir would one day return to the void from which it came. And yet he ruled, and he loved, and he gathered his fallen warriors, and he waited, as all things in that vast and patient cosmos waited, for the turning of the wheel that had begun the moment warm breath first touched the ancient ice.